Good evening. I'd like to bring this Committee of the Whole to order. Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022. I'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Inca, Katmaks, and Syilx people. Moving on to 2.1, Committee of the Whole meeting minutes of April 25th, 2022. We need them to be adopted. I need a mover. Second. Luck and White second. And any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. There are no delegations. There is no unfinished business. And we move on to new business 5.1. 2022-2026 Financial Plan Review and Discussion. And Mr. Anderson, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. We're just going to go through the report today. There is no PowerPoint presentation. We'll just work through, and some of this stuff you've seen in detail in previous reports. I tried to trim it down a little bit, but it's still in for this discussion, the draft review of the 2022 to 2026 financial plan this time. Last time we were just looking at specifically 2022 operating capital. This plan now has everything in it, a pretty long list of capital at the end, and also has the reserve and surplus sort of continuity schedule in there based on some preliminary results that we've gotten from the auditors. So that is what our plan is today, is to go through this. There are a number of appendixes here. Appendix A is the draft 2022-2026 financial plan. Those are the raw numbers on one page, and then the 2022-2026 capital plan, which will be included in bylaw 2332-2002 when it's brought forward on May 10th. Next week, and that is the one bylaw, and then there'll be a second bylaw 2033, which will be the 2022 tax rates, which will include all of the other bodies as well, which we've got those in place now. So a highlight of what we're just going to go through today is that the mill rate has decreased by 14.75% in this proposal. The 8% increase that we're proposing is across all rate classes, and that was non-market changes. So based on property values or properties that were valued as of last year, an 8% overall increase to taxes collected for each one of those rate classes. There is now in this plan $25 million in flood recovery projects in the 2022-2023 capital. Those have been highlighted in the capital plan. Obviously, there's going to be more capital projects, but those are the ones that we've identified in this iteration of the plan here. What I'm proposing with the plan is that starting in 2023, that council start to allocate a certain amount per year to contribute to the reserve funds. It was brought up at the last council meeting. So I plugged a number in of $850,000, and that's just based on making sure that our surpluses don't go into the red by doing that, our unappropriated surplus balance. And that would start in 2023, and we can see the impact when we get into the reserves and what that would look like after 5 years' time, how much would be in each one of those reserve accounts. To do this successfully, what I'm proposing here is a 4% increase 2023 to 2026. We know that there are inflationary issues right now. Will there be inflationary issues in 23, 24, 25, 26? Not sure, but 4% helps to cover that inflation, and it also helps us to implement that annual reserve contribution piece as well, so we can start to do that. So that is a bit different than the 3% that we had discussed the other day. Now that is not set in stone. It's not, I mean, it's obviously going to be next year's planning cycle where the council of the day will determine what the rate increase is going to be. But just for the budget, that's what I've put in at this time. So going through the revenues, this is similar to what we had seen at the last meeting, and the only thing that's highlighted here is that we've got 1.3 million in grant funding to cover the recovery operations, and you'll see that on the expenditure side as well, added in costs for the recovery operations group. So that's running the team that's in the Civic Center, the Merit Support Center staff that may not be funded through other means at this point. So we're estimating there to be about 1.3 million in costs that won't be covered through expenditure authorization forms or other means. And that is the grant funding that we have there is part of that 21 million that we'll be receiving. So there was a proportion in there for grant funding for operations, and we're including that on the revenue side. Nothing else changes from the prior meeting. We're looking to get an increase of 1 million in revenue from property tax. Parcel taxes, no changes, and then some notes regarding licenses and fees. So on page 3, property taxes, again, summary, 29% increase in assessed values for the City of Merritt, and a proposed mill rate decrease of 14.75. Resulting in an 8% tax increase on existing properties. We know that there's some additional revenue from the utility revitalization tax exemption for the Nikola clean power site that is coming back into revenue in 2022. And then again, 4% proposed for the plan over the 23 to 26 period.
Mr. Anderson, can I bring to your attention, you brought us a rate change on residential of minus 16%. Is that a decrease of, has that been changed? Is the decrease?
I should hand this out here, if we can just hand this out. It'll be on the site here. These are just the rates, the combined rates that we're handing out here for all of the bodies together. So when you factor in the TNRD and the regional hospital and all of the other ones, school tax, etc. Okay. The actual rate combined is decreasing 16%. So even though our rate's only decreasing 14.75, there is an overall 16% rate decrease. So that does help offset the 8% that we're putting forward here.
Okay, thank you.
The municipal tax collections, $9 million is the municipal tax. As you can see, that's a 12.7% year-over-year change. Again, that's now taking into account the non-market changes and other things that come on board as a result of that. The rates by class are shown there. These are all municipal rates again. And the residential at the bottom of the page there shows that the result of new constructions, that adds 70,000 out of the 418,000 increase on the residential side. 70,000 relates specifically to new construction. So the more we can grow the new construction side, the better it is for existing homeowners to see those dollars increase through new construction. Again, on page 4, that just gives a breakdown of the amounts that are collected from the existing homes. So 347,000 coming from the existing base. That's the 8% increase. The municipal portion of the increase is $119 based on an average year-over-year house price. So a house that was valued at $323 versus one that was at $418. Those are the averages for the City of Merritt. That would be $119. That is the municipal portion only. If a home did have a full 29% increase, it's obviously going to be more than that when you combine the other rates in, because we're only 3.9% of the roughly 6.7 mill rate for residential.
And do you have the range of the increases to assessment?
The highest percentage you're talking about, I don't have that handy at this point.
Okay.
Certainly we'll be able to provide that for the next meeting.
Thank you.
I just did some calculations based on a house that was assessed at $300,000 in 2021. If that increased at the average amount of 29%, that would be $387,000. The net impact to the homeowner for that average increase would be about $200. So combining in the other bodies as well. Now, if that same home only increased 15%, so it went from $300,000 to $345,000, that would actually work out to a net reduction of $83 overall. So if you were only a 15% assessment increase, if you were 20%, that's just about a break even. That's just about breaking even with last year's. Now, we will, by the end of this week on our website, have a calculator that people can go to and put their new assessed values in to see what roughly their amount would be. It's not going to be exactly what's on the tax notice, but it will give them a rough estimate of what to expect for their tax bill. Thanks to Mr. Lois. We talk about the business side here, so the business piece, which is driven primarily by the non-market changes being brought on, and some market rate increases, so $600,000 coming out of the business class. I think that includes business, light industry, major industry, so that what makes up the whole $1 million increase between the two of them. Any questions on revenue or on taxes before I move on to the expense side? The expenditures, so the one change or a couple of changes here since the 25th. We did miss a couple of things in our plan that we had put forward on the 25th, and one of them was the invasive weed program that we committed to with the TNRD. So I believe that goes to homeowners, doesn't come right back to the city, but there is a cost to do that, and we've agreed to pay $20,000 a year on an annual basis. And one thing I did not have in was an estimated $40,000 cost for a consultant to do a rate review at the end of the year. I know we talked about that, getting that out of the way in 2022 so that decisions could be made around rates in 2023. And then the $1.3 million in recovery costs. So initially we had about $225,000 in recovery operations. That was going to be the non-recoverable amount that we were estimating from Emergency Management BC if we weren't able to get fully funded on all of our expenditures. The 1.3 is fully funded through the recovery on the grant side, so that's been added in on the expense side as well. And nothing else changes on from the previous meeting. On page 6, some of the numbers that were used or percentages that were used as I was putting together the 2023 to 2026 plan, increases to, contract costs for things like computer software. We know those increases are more than 2%, less than 5%, but using 4% on an annual basis. So you'll see 2023 has some other than 2% increases. And then for 2024 to 2026, without a crystal ball to be able to tell what those rates are going to be, just left most of those at 2%. We know that insurance for property is probably going to go up a bit on an annual basis as more disasters occur across North America, and those rates, they'll just naturally go up. Natural gas and electricity's seen a bigger spike, so a little bit more of an increase there. But things that can offset that obviously would be some capital asset programs for green initiatives, and those sort of things might help us on the natural gas and electricity side. The payroll side here is the same as prior. It's those 4 positions that have been approved already and across various departments. Nothing different to speak of on the payroll side. The page 7, the 2022 to 2026 capital plan, and that's supported by Appendix C. So if you wanted to see the full list of all of the projects that are included in there, that is in Appendix C. Again, there's very few projects that are really that are discretionary in our 2022 plan. pretty much stuff that needs to be done. There's now 11.6 million in the 2022 capital, and 6.2 of that relates to recovery projects. And that is funded by grants, that's 6.2, but we've got 8.2 funded by grants in 2022. A little bit of debt financing, and then 3.1 million roughly from reserves. And we'll get into a bit more of a reserve discussion in a minute here. So the Appendix C, I said that the first 2 years of the plan includes more than 51 million. Actually, all 5 years is 51 million, but the first 2 years is $41 million in capital spending. We have in the year 2023, we start the Vote Street Phase 2 project. It was initially 7.5 million. We had some revised cost estimates. We think it might be closer to 9 million. We know that there is a grant that we are applying for that is 6 million. So the first year, if it's 4.5 million, that would be covered. And then in 2024, it would just be 1.5 million out of that 4.5 million that would be covered. So we would be on the hook for roughly 3 million in the second year. So that's how that one is laid out. And when we look at the reserves and surpluses, if we don't get that grant funding, we have to consider the fact that we may need to do this on our own using reserves at some point down the road here. Exit 286 funded by debt is included in 2023, so that's part of what's driving that $30 million amount in 2023 is the $7.5 million project there, which is again funded by debt, which is recovered through a local area service charge to those properties. We have not done the DCC review at this point, so there's very little that comes out of DCC in this capital plan. So that's a bit of an upside for future years, is to have that DCC in place with projects that are applicable for the capital that we want to do over the next 5 years. So once that DCC is done, we may not have to pull as much from reserves. We could use some of the 5 million plus in DCCs that are out there. The process we went through was pre-food. It wasn't actually pre-food, but it was pre-flood, and I thought Adam might catch that one, but to create a detailed long-term plan. So it was kind of pre-food when I was doing this, possibly. I think I was late for lunch yesterday, so it might have been pre-food. Yeah, so pre-flood. Then we had a long-term capital plan that we were working on at that time. And once we get that back to that again, then we can start to incorporate that into the DCC bylaw, which again will help us with these projects. The funding for the projects is included in Schedule Appendix B. So that provides some detail on an annual basis. If it is general water, sewer, and what type of funding will be required. Is it funded by grants or debt or surplus? So we'll look at a bit of detail on those schedules in a minute. Take a bunch of questions on that. The reserve and surplus continuity on page 8. So this is a summary of the estimated reserve and surplus balances. These are opening balances for the start of the year. So 2021 opening balance was what we had at the start of last fiscal year. And what we're expecting to be at is the 2022 open number. So there is a growth of roughly $2 million in that particular reserve and surplus. And I'll get into a bit of detail on how that comes about. You can see steady growth over 5 years. By doing the $850,000 per year into reserves, we start to see some growth in those reserve accounts. The 2023-24 capital plan, as I mentioned, relies on $6 million in grant funding for Vote Street Phase 2. If that $6 million isn't available or it's a lesser amount, then you have to start thinking about using reserves to cover that project. Or at the time, if we have DCCs in place, there would be an opportunity to use DCCs on that as well. And just to note that 2024 to 2026 does not include all possible projects at this time. I mean, we haven't forecasted out 3, 4, and 5 years from now what we're actually going to spend. We don't have a lot in this capital plan when it comes to, you know, take this 500 meters of road and resurface it, and we don't have a lot of that built in. That's part of the asset management side and making sure that you're continually renewing things. So it may look like a curve that's going up, but I'm projecting that it'll probably be more flat than the upward trend that you see there once you start to add in new projects. On page 9, there's the table that drives the chart. So by doing the annual allotment there, you can see that some of these funds will actually have some balances in them by 2027. Your general capital will have, you know, $400,000 in it. The transportation infrastructure will have $768,000. So you'll start to see some increases, so that we'll have some money there set aside for the following year where you'll be able to fund some of these projects. And if you do get into a year where it's something that you can't put $850,000 away, you'll at least have some funds in there to draw from. So that's not what we have today. If you look at 2021, there's lots of holes in the reserves, and those holes mean that there is nothing in those accounts at this point. The plan would be to start this in 2023, just because 2022 is pretty tight on surplus. There's not a lot there to play with. So the table at the bottom there, the proposal, you know, $850,000. I've just gone through and put numbers in. I mean, this would be up to the council at the time of setting the 2023 plan, how you want to allocate that, how much you want to put into the reserve accounts. But just knowing that transportation tends to require a bit more, as well as general capital, just made those a little bit larger. But and some of them are $10,000, $25,000, not that significant, but they do add up over time. So the following schedule on page 10 there, again, just shows the changes between the capital reserves. The bottom of that table shows the changes in the surplus balances. The unappropriated surplus is available for the different funds. You can see that we have an issue with general, which we knew we had early on, and there is opportunity to review these opening balances as well next year. So even though we look at 2022 opening with 1.4 million in general, 4.8 in sewer, 2.3 in water for 885,000, we have the opportunity to go back and do a review of how those reserves were actually set up a few years back and make sure that we've got them set up the way that they should have been. They may be underestimating the amount in general. It may be overestimating water and sewer. So there's an opportunity to adjust those unappropriated surplus balances. But at this time, just running with what was in our initial review. So page 11, so surplus and review, consistent annual operating surpluses are important. That helps drive the reserve funding, but also these consistent transfers as well. That'll help with the buildup of those reserves. The policy that we have in place, policy 4-20, suggests that the city maintain minimum reserve balances at the end of the fiscal year equal to the capital budget requirements for the following year. And this is what we're planning to do starting with 2023. The disclaimer here on financial risk and implications is that we need to understand the implications of the decisions related to revenue and expenses and capital and how we fund things for the future. So there's an increased demand. We know there will be an increased demand in capital spending, and we've got some deficits out there. And if we have low annual surpluses and we're not putting away money for these reserves, then we're going to be in a situation. So what can council do is review this, provide feedback on this information. We can revise this for next week for the 2022 financial plan bylaw, tax rate bylaw. We've gone through some public consultation. We had the last meeting open to the public to attend either online or in person. We had no input received from anyone from the public, no comments with regards to the proposed budget that we had put forward on the 25th. So,
Mr. Lois, is there anyone online?
Your Worship, just to confirm with, as Mr. Anderson has said, no public input was provided to City Hall through any channel that I'm aware of to be provided to you, and of course there is nobody in the public gallery tonight. There is one viewer currently watching, and I believe we maxed out at 4 viewers about 15 minutes ago. So there are at least some members of the public who are watching this meeting.
After the meeting.
Thank you.
Fully trusted, completely trusted.
and the other one that was consulted, obviously our auditors who will be here next week with the financial statements for 2021. They were consulted as well when we were starting to set up the reserve and surpluses and providing their opinion on what we need to do in order to maintain healthy balances in those areas. Now, there is the schedules attached here. So Schedule A on page 13 is just the full-on revenue expenditures and the financial plan, if you like. The second part of it, Appendix B here, is Schedule B of that same bylaw, which has all of the capital projects by different funds and by different source. Doesn't identify the individual projects. That's on 2 pages. And then after that, we get into on page 16 through 18. Those are the projects that are included in our 5-year plan at this point. You might see some things in there that you question, or there might be some things in there that are missing that could be added or should be added in future plans.
And when you say page 16 to 18, we're looking at page 19 to 21 of the actual document itself.
Oh, is it 19 to 21? Yeah, it starts with these ones. Now, the highlighting there, the green ones, those are ones that were new since we had our meeting on the 25th. So 88,400. So there is a Husqvarna tractor mower for 18,600. That was covered by insurance funds. So we received money back from ICBC on that. That was transferred directly into the equipment replacement fund in 2022. So this is using money from that equipment replacement fund for that mower. That is the bigger of the mowers that they have. Airport fuel card reader. So this was a late addition to capital as well. We've experienced in the past 5 years that I've been here issues on an annual basis with the reader that we have there. It is supported by a company out of the US. I believe they don't have upgrades available for that device for us. And it had a major failing over the last month here as well, with not being able to take credit card payments. We had to send somebody up every time a helicopter was fueling. If it was a long weekend, we had to send staff up to actually run it, and then we had to get a name and a credit card number and process that at City Hall. So there was a lot of stuff that we had to do to get that to happen. The suggestion is that we go with a new card reader, a new software, and possibly a company out of Canada as well. There's a couple of local vendors that, or local as in Canada, that can provide support. So that one there, the airport committee will be happy to see is included in, and that should definitely improve things.
We have a question from Mr. Luck, Councillor Luck.
Thank you, Mayor. Just going back to reserves and everything, I think when we had a conversation some time ago, because we're playing with that number of $850,000, and I like what you're doing there. We need to have implemented that, and I've mentioned that before, and just so people know that we're probably in the ballpark. Some of the research I've been doing around reserves and everything the last couple of weeks was showing that a lot of municipalities, a lot of cities put about 1% of their total assets away annually, actually embed that in the budget, about 1%.
Yeah.
So far, I think you were mentioning our assets are about 65 million.
In that 65 to 75 million range, so that would roughly work out to about $700,000 a year. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're really
Yeah.
close to what you're a little bit more than that, but we need some wiggle room anyway there. It doesn't hurt to put a little bit more in there. So,
Yeah.
Mr. Anderson, I really like what you've done around the reserves and everything, and I've got a level of comfort where we're at with it. I know nobody likes taxes going up or anything like that, but we've got to do something. We've got to have these just so people understand as well, these are depreciating accounts.
Yeah.
You buy a car and you start saving right away for a new car. It's the same thing here in the municipality. We put infrastructure in the ground, we build buildings and that kind of, we got to start saving to replace those as soon as we finished and open the doors on those things. So this is really good that we're really thinking long-term on these things and actually implementing a program for the reserves. And as much as it hurts, it's going to hurt if we don't have the money there either, right? It's that tricky balance that we've got to do. So really appreciate and thanks for all that.
A couple other ones in recreation. There was Nikola Valley Memorial Arena. There is on the concession side a grease trap that needs to be replaced. And then also the City Hall building here has a roof hatch that has a extension ladder on a wall, and it's caused a few issues over time from a safety perspective. So that needs to be done as well too from a work safe perspective. So those are the amounts that total up to the $88,000. And the stuff in blue for your information is stuff that's been added in as part of the recovery project. So when you see things like the Pine Street rebuild in 2023 of $3 million, the Middlesboro Bridge construction in 2023 of $8.5 million. So those are the capital projects, and those are all funded through grants. So they're offset by grant funding.
Mr. Smith, you had a comment?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'd really like to thank Mr. Anderson for his work on this. It's been a genuinely wild effort from him in order to put this budget together with the amount of support, or in some instances the lack thereof that's been available. And so it's just truly exceptional and really thankful for that. What I want to highlight for council is, as you were looking at our projected surpluses and what we would have to allocate in future years, we are still working forward to what I would call is a genuine 5-year financial plan. We have more visibility, as you can see from the capital projects, than you had last year, which is more than you had it the year before that. But we're still not out a whole lot further than 2024 right now. 2025, there isn't a lot of visibility into, as you'll recognize. So our commitment from staff here is to get to the spot where this is going to look and feel like a 5-year financial plan, both in name and in truth. And so acknowledge that right now I'm really happy that with everything that's happened, we were able to bring this to a 3-year point. So with that, I just want to put an asterisk that though the surplus balances or the reserve balances look very healthy in 2025 and 2026, that's largely because there is not much capital allocated for those years yet. So please do take those projections with a fairly large grain of salt. That's what I have for you.
Thank you. And do you have anything else, Mr. Anderson, or are you?
No, it's through Mayor and Council. I don't have anything else to add to the discussion today. Yes, thank you, Sean. It has been quite a effort to get this out this year with everything that's been going on. But I'm feeling pretty comfortable with it if the council now or council of the day, stays with the course and does the allocation to reserves and realizes that we can't survive on 1% tax increases on a long-term basis. You need to have that fund set aside to replace the roof on your house. Otherwise, it's going to start leaking. So, I mean, you've got a plan here that starts the process in place, and the next director of finance is going to have to take it to the next level and so forth, right? So I'm pretty happy with how it's looking, and hopefully you are as well. And we can move past this and on to rebuilding.
Thank you. And we are looking for a motion to receive for information unless somebody has a different option. They want to talk about changes to this document. Okay, so we've got Luck and White. And any discussion on this? Well, I'm gonna, Councillor Etchart.
I think it's been said by most, and it, you know, seeing this project that's been a great effort with everything that we've been through is reasonable, and putting money to reserves for the plans going forward is the thing to do, because we've seen other municipalities that had increases this year because they're coming up with expenses that were unanticipated and likely due to inflation. So it, even though it's maybe a little higher than what we originally expected, it's, I think, the only option that we have, and I appreciate the detail as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, and, okay. Councillor White, or I'm sorry, Councillor Christopherson first and then Councillor White.
Well, just looking through this, Wayne, you'll have made the airport committee really happy to see the amount of money that is going to be spent, has been allotted for airport fencing and lighting and taxiway paving, and a line in there about the airport T hangars and building and so on. So there's a crowd of followers that will think this is marvelous.
Thank you. Councillor White.
And I just want to say, Wayne, that from when we did our first budget meeting, at the very beginning, I had no clue, no idea, because I'm not a consolidated person and can't figure it out. And I really appreciate these because it has it all there. It has it all split out. We know exactly what's going on, and when someone asks a question, we can answer it. So thank you.
Thank you, Malvina.
So seeing no other questions, I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed, none, and carried. And before we end this, I'd like to take this opportunity to provide a tribute to Mr. Anderson. You've taken on the CFO role about two and a half years ago? I don't know, a while back. We've kind of had this year of flux that
Roughly
nobody
about 2, yeah.
Okay. And we asked for a lot of financial information changes. We wanted to have the information more transparent, more accountable, and you stepped up to the plate. To do that, you actually worked your buns off, working many, many nights of overtime, and that's unpaid time, but it was still overtime. You worked through the fires, the COVID, the heat dome, the atmospheric river, and ultimately the flood, but also the economy with the increased inflation. And over the years, you have managed to provide a document, the budget, that is much more transparent, much more understandable to the private individual. And I was going to say we've worked hard on that, but that's the royal we. You've done a lot with a lot of the senior staff as well. I mean, we really have seen that team effort there. And towards the end of the flooding event, you pretty well had to start the entire process again. But you did it. You provided more and more accurate data for us, and the data that you're producing in the financial system is much cleaner, much more, what's the word I want, developed, I suppose, or, yeah. So I know I've been tough on you, but you've come through with flying colors, and I so appreciate it, and I know all of us here do as well. We're going to lose you, and I'm sorry that we've overworked you. Sort of, but not really.
Let's not let any prospective applicants see that.
This was Wayne wanting to make a difference, and you made that difference. And I'm really glad you left us in a better financial position or system than when you took the role over. I just want to wish you all the best in Oliver. Don't forget us. I mean, I was just getting used to Wayne.
Takes a while.
But yeah, you've done a lot with our reserves. You've moved us in the position that we're asking you to move into, and I'm pleased. And I can speak for all of council in that. We're all quite pleased with the product you've produced. And we know that it wasn't without any glitches. You've worked hard to let us not see those glitches, I suppose. But I appreciate what you've done. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And I'm going to open this for any other councillor who wants to just thank you for your time here. And for the public, Mr. Anderson's last day with us is May the 19th? May 18th.
18th, yeah.
Saturday would be more fitting, wouldn't it? Wait.
14th.
Yeah.
13th.
No, 18th. So they can speak now or speak later personally, whatever. Councillor Christofferson.
Well, Mr. Anderson, you will be missed. When I first came on to council hundreds of years ago, or sometimes it feels that way, the budget did seem to be a very complicated process. It still is, but you've certainly clarified it and made it much more transparent and readable. And as I mentioned before, when the airport committee sees actual projects put down and the amount of money that's going to go in there, I think they're going to be truly amazed that they have been heard, for one thing, and I think they will also be amazed at how costly some things are that we just assume, how much can a fence cost? Now we know. But there's an incredible amount of work to running a city, and I, for one, really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody else does, but I've had more of a perspective over the 10 years than when I first started out. That it's a much more readable document than we've had in the past, and thank you very much for that. You listened to our concerns and our questions, and what on earth does this mean, and really appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kurt. Yeah. There is a balance between the detail and the summary, right? I mean, it can be like, this could be 18 pages, it could be 100 pages and detail, and then there's a summary which could be a PowerPoint of 10 pages where we look at some numbers in general. So I like to kind of bring a balance between the two. It's difficult to do, though. It's difficult to take detail and summarize it and not miss anything. So I appreciate that you like what you're seeing, and I am passing the baby off to Norman If Norman's here next year through the budget cycle, then he can take this on. And I'm not that far away, and I will be connecting in. So I have a, strong desire for Merit to succeed and for what's been put in place to carry on. And I'm pretty excited for, I think 5 years from now, I may regret leaving Merit because it might just be that little jewel in the valley where there's a beautiful walkway by a river and biking and mountain biking and all of that stuff. I think it's got great potential to come out of this disaster like a lot better than it is today. So I would hope that I can visit a lot and use those amenities that are going to be here and see a fence around the airport. But I thank everyone else that helps too. I mean, all of the managers and stuff have been great to work with and always accommodating when I've got a request that's like half an hour from now, please give me these numbers because I need them. So they've been great to deal with. On the support side, the grant writing role I think has been really critical to have, and hopefully that stays on as a part-time role because there's so much opportunity out there. And even things like this airport stuff that's in here, we've talked about like, hey, there's going to be some grants I think available for that. So Kurt, it's in there. Hopefully it stays in there, but it might be grant funded in the future. So good there. I think Sean's got a great handle on what's required and where to assign resources and those sort of things. And I think everyone knows grants is going to be important. Lots of money coming this way. How to manage that's going to be a challenge over the next year and setting that up. So between Norman and Sean Strang and stuff going through and setting up how that's going to be tracked is going to be important. So there's lots on the plate. I feel I'm leaving behind and I'm pushing off to Norman, but I will be available over the next coming weeks and months to help out as well too. So yeah, so it's been a good experience, and I appreciate the opportunity to do the role. So that's great.
Thank you. And I know we have that team in place, the team of all managers that work really, really well together, and we're really strong on communicating with each other. That is quite different from what it used to be. So I think we're doing quite well, but I do wish you the very best. We'll still see you on May the 10th, but
on weekends,
yeah. You're not getting off that easy.
Too, yeah.
So thank you very much, and that brings us to the termination of this meeting.